Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News, continuing with the good content. We are checking out the rest of episode 5, what was left out. We're just going to get straight into it.
With last episode covering the main purpose of the expedition, this one will focus more on the runecrafting aspect.
Kill.
In addition to the minor details skipped from the journey itself, there was quite a bit more added to the actual art of runecrafting. Things like Gondo's specific role in it, as well as the extent to which he knew how they worked.
Okay.
So, just like we've been doing every week, let's continue our cut content series and see what the anime's been missing from the novels. Let's get started.
Okay.
Episode 44, Part 2,
Right here.
The Dwarven Crafter, covering Chapter 2 from Volume 11 of the light novel. Just like how we saw in the anime, the entire expedition party was pretty much a small army. It had 25 of Shaltyr's level 80 undead,
Jesus.
approximately 30 of Mora's magical beasts, 6 vampire brides who would attend to Ainz, then 5 Hanzos which Ainz had summoned prior. Although not magical beasts, there were also 5 mammoth-like creatures who were used to transport supplies. They weren't strong enough to take into battle, but their elemental resistances made them perfect for traveling anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Now, for those not experienced with this sort of adventure, Ainz made sure to equip them with his standard climbing gear. It was a ring that made it unnecessary to eat or drink, another that
Oh, whoa, ain't that handy?
was imbued with fly, which pretty much removed the risk of falling. These were the items Ainz would always bring with him whenever climbing mountains in Yggdrasil.
Sick.
A quick thing to note before he left, though, was that Cocytus was at the ready with an entire army. Remember, this whole expedition was simply meant to get information. That and hopefully establish a diplomatic relationship. So, should an enemy player show up and cause a bit of trouble, then retreat was always going to be Ainz's first option. He would gather as much intelligence as he possibly could.
Man, he actually stomped those dragons, didn't he?
It was a natural response to a threat he wasn't sure he could defend against. Fast forward now to the actual journey, and the pristine majesty of nature that Ainz was getting to experience here was incomparable to what he was used to in Yggdrasil. It was an overwhelming sight that brought with it this satisfying sense of fulfillment. Not because it was land he was about to conquer, but instead because it was land that he had never seen before. What I mean is that the very act of traversing these undiscovered landscapes was the very thing Ainz envisioned for adventuring. Every sight he was witnessing was the scenery of what a true adventurer should gaze upon. So, even if Ainz didn't actually find the dwarves, he would still return satisfied since he got to experience a true adventure.
Okay.
Now, when it came time to rest for the night, the spell Ainz had used here was the 10th tier spell Great Fortress.
Which is so sick, just like, I need a hotel. Bam!
Interact with, but unfortunately in the new world that wasn't the case anymore. Just like how friendly fire was now turned on, unless you were the person who created the fortress, opening the front doors wasn't a privilege available to you. Only Ainz could let people interact.
Right.
Another quick thing to note is that although the tower looks much smaller on the outside, the inside is made bigger through what's called expanded space.
Right.
So, despite the proportions,
So there's magical stuff going. It's like the TARDIS.
It was while
In Doctor Who.
a very
Yeah,
interesting scene was
I can reference things.
You see, in order to ensure that Zenbadu was traveling the right
He's like, wait a minute, that's so big. He just summoned a building.
Something he was really an expert in, but he had been practicing with Shizu and the priest from last season. What that really meant, though, was that he had tried a few times to extract or manipulate memories, but this minimal practice wasn't nearly enough to make him skilled at it.
Right.
There was definitely a chance that he could mess up here. So, not only was the act of seeing or manipulating memories extremely difficult, but the farther back he went, the more mana it would cost. And because Zenbadu's memories were so many years back, just getting there had cost Ainz pretty much all his mana.
Ah, wow.
It was an expensive spell that left Ainz with only foggy visions of very indescript mountain ranges. That being the case, the spell itself definitely wasn't worth the mana it had cost, but perhaps now Ainz could assist with a little bit of the guidance. Once the group had finally arrived, it was after the Hanzos had scouted it out that Ainz would go with them to investigate himself. In his usual precautious nature, though, he didn't leave without first setting up some bait on the outside. You see, if there was someone following them and waiting to make their move, then the best play would be to pick off stragglers one by one. So, what Ainz had done in anticipation of this was leave behind the weakest monsters as bait, along with a Hanzo who could scout from a distance.
Sick.
That way, if anyone did take the opportunity to attack, he could observe their power and gain a little information on what they were capable of.
He's a clever man.
Perhaps even follow them back to where they were operating from. Of course, Ainz didn't want the mammoths or vampire brides to die, but as low-tier mobs that spawned automatically, he wasn't as concerned with them as he was for his other NPCs. Now, with a fully equipped Shaltir traveling at his side,
Ho, ho,
if
ho.
an attack was to come directly at him while in the cave, the mere presence of Shaltir was enough to prevent any enemy from hitting him with an instant
Yeah.
combo. Sure, she may not be very experienced, but the power she provided was definitely enough to buy Ainz the time he needed. When Ainz finally arrived at the abandoned city, the sheer lack of people to be found within had led Ainz to start opening doors one by one. As the Hanzos continued to search the tunnels, he and everyone else would scout the buildings to search for clues. They were looking for information as to why the dwarves had left this place. What they found instead, though, was mysterious tracks belonging to some unknown creature crawling out of the place.
Gao Gao, the
Was that walking was done with 2 legs, and behind those tracks aligned to indicate some sort of tail. So it was as Aura followed the tracks around the city that the conclusion she and Ainz had come to was that they were doing the same thing he was. It seemed like these creatures were investigating the houses one by one as well. So, as they followed the tracks to a building up against a wall, Ainz would then use scouting magic to create a sensory orb, a type of drone that could perform recon without Ainz having to put himself in danger.
Cool.
The only threat that came from using this was the off chance a person had set up a counterintelligence spell. That wasn't something particularly detrimental to Ainz, but if someone like Zambadu was near him when the counter was activated, the damage done would probably end up one-shotting him. But as expected from the search with this magical eye, nothing within the building was out of the ordinary. There wasn't much to see until Hanzo had finally reported on the presence of Gondo. So, prior to the meeting we saw in the anime, Ainz once again ensured that every possible scenario was accounted for. Should a powerful enemy appear while Ainz and Aura were in the tunnels, then everyone else was ordered to withdraw via the use of gate. Then, by sending only Aura to confront Gondo first, the chances of him detecting her presence were significantly minimized. That didn't mean
It's quite funny how he tried to go invisible. It's like, you can still see me, can't you?
First, then Ainz felt it was best to make
Never
himself
mind.
undetectable. A feat that could only be done by casting Perfect Unknowable. By
Perfect
using the
unknowable.
spell to erase his presence and to make himself invisible, unless Gondo was also a high-level thief, detecting Ainz was practically impossible now. Now, while much of the encounter was pretty much the same, there was a bit more to the concern Gondo was showing for Aura. You see, in addition to monsters she needed to look out for, he had also checked if she was carrying items which made escape more viable. It was all part of his way of making sure Aura was prepared for the environment she had stepped into. And while Ainz did find this concern to be satisfactory, he wasn't impressed since he felt Gondo should have been asking even more questions. The sheer absurdity of the situation was something he felt Gondo should be more cautious about. In any case, it was around here that Ainz felt it was about time to reveal himself.
Fair.
leading to
It's
an
like,
interesting
okay,
perspective
well,
on Ainz
I've been chilling around for a while now.
Much like how you wouldn't find a good-natured demon, believing an undead could be friendly to the living was just as unlikely. It was a point that had made Ainz remember a few NPCs from Yggdrasil. Back during his days of playing, the only NPC to reach the Dark Young's level of popularity was a demon who yearned for the light named Mephistopheles. He was a friendly creature of terror that often gave all sorts of variety.
A friendly creature of terror.
So, if it had to exist
What?
in the game, then I'm not sure he
That doesn't seem to make any sense to me, but okay.
as well. Now, with regards to all the talk of runes next, Ainz had gone to explain everything he knew about them first. You see, because Gondo seemed rather serious about the topic, Ainz didn't want to scare him away by seeming all discreet about it. So, what Ainz ended up giving was very vague explanations.
I just punched the desk.
Mainly how many runes he knew to exist, what kind of them he was familiar with, then brief descriptions of the specific ones he did know. It was upon hearing all this long-lost knowledge that Gondo immediately began to share what he knew after. Out of all the 90 runes that he was familiar with, 50 were from the lower tier,
Right.
25 from the middle, 10 from the upper, then 5 from the
Ep5.
high.
Right.
There were also rumors of hidden letters and god tier runes as well, but to Gondo those were only the things of legends. As for how these runes worked, well, depending
Magic
on the word
it
that
in,
the rune
laddie.
corresponded to, the
Samurai
item
Jack
inscribed with
reference.
it would gain that enchantment. So, for a sword that carried the low tier rune sharp, the blade would instantly become sharper once the rune was engraved properly.
Oh,
Making this a highly cost-effective way of enchanting items.
cool.
What had caused this practice to shift away from relevance, though, was the flood of new technology that occurred 200 years ago. You see, after an evil spirit had attacked the royal capital, the royal family had no choice but to flee for help from external countries. It was when they returned with that help that a whole array of new technology began to make its way into their society, specifically enchanted items which were much faster to make than rune weapons. So, once the dwarves saw that they could be saving almost double to triple the time, many runecrafters began to phase out of their fields,
Okay.
instead choosing to become magic casters since enchanting things was so much easier. An interesting thing to note about Gondo, though,
Take the easy way out. I see.
Now, the title he liked to refer to himself as was Rune-Tech Developer. This wasn't someone who carved runes directly into the items, but instead a person who experimented with ways to improve the process. He was actively researching methods that would shorten the rune crafting time, as well as allow for the eventual mass production of them, all in hopes that he would one day develop a technology that could only be achieved by runes. The reason why this is because Gondo didn't want rune crafting to fall into obscurity again. As it was now, rune crafting was on a steady
Never forget where you came from.
Of course, if he could have mastered the craft and become like his father, then perhaps the story would be a different one. The thing is, though, for someone like Gondo, that simply wasn't possible. Yes, he could craft a single rune if he tried really hard, but doing anything more was simply beyond his abilities. The way Ainz had put it was that if all Gondo had was 11 levels to invest, then the first 10 were likely used to unlock the runecrafting class, then the last was used to become that level 1 runecraft. Then, since 11 was the most levels that he could earn, placing any more into runecrafting was just impossible.
Right.
That's the reason why no matter how hard he trained, he would never become any better at the actual art of runecrafting.
It's a shame.
So, that being the case, what Gondo chooses to do instead is dedicate himself to the research of his father and his father's father. As the two most prominent runecrafters to ever exist in the country, Gondo knew for sure that the means to improve the process actually existed.
Okay.
He may not be able to...
I suppose, yeah, he would know, wouldn't he?
Himself, but with the research his family had left behind, there wasn't a doubt in his mind that he could discover it. I mean, it was, after all, the only thing he could do to ensure runecrafting never fade from history again. And that was the very motivation which inspired Ainz to support him. Seeing someone so passionate for something so futile was more than enough to assure Ainz that Gondo was the right person to lead him to rare technology. He had also felt an affinity with his passion to keep something so dear to him alive. Just like how Ainz was doing with his guild, so too Gondo was doing with runecrafting.
Right.
Now, the last thing to mention about this episode was the significance of Ainz's first mission to Shaltir here. You see, while Laura was sent with her to subdue the beasts, she was ordered not to interfere unless Shaltir began to massacre them. Aside from that, this whole operation...
Well, the weird one's like, don't get involved unless she's going way over the top and absolutely annihilating everybody.
So, knowing how important this was to redeem herself, Shaltir emptied her mind of any sadistic intentions and instead filled it with how best to complete the mission. A chain of thoughts which led to the outcome we see in the anime.
We just traps them.
That's pretty much it for episode 5. Episode 6 should be out by Monday, then episode 7 a few days after that.
Cool.
Before I go though, don't forget to check out the Succube apparel before it's gone again. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time.
Ciao. Cool. We're learning stuff. I am enjoying the current season of Overlord. It's brilliant. I think I'm going to binge some more Della's Part-Timer. And me and my friends did watch the first 3 episodes of Harem in the Labyrinth of... and we found it quite entertaining. The censoring on Crunchyroll is hilarious. But yeah, Overlord, I'm really enjoying these cut content videos. It's really cool to check out what they've been missing out on and changes, and yeah, I'll just keep checking them out as they come out. Thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, link in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month helps support the channel. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. And thank you all for watching. I just punched myself in the face. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe, and leave comments down below. Let me know what you want to discuss in future videos, and I'll see you guys, next time.